The U.S. Department of Justice announcing an investigation into whether Philadelphia police have good cause standards to revoke permits to legally carry firearms. Just today, in a letter to the mayor of Philadelphia, the DOJ said Civil Rights Division's Second Amendment section is conducting this investigation into whether the police department is violating the Second and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. In some statements made in the letter, the DOJ's Second Amendment Rights Division said that they will consider all relevant information, including pertaining to the efforts the city and the PPD have undertaken to ensure adherence to the Constitution and federal law. That's from Harmeet Dillon. She is the Assistant Attorney General. She continued in her letter that if we conclude there's reasonable cause to believe that such violations are occurring, we will aim to work cooperatively with the city and the police department to reach agreements regarding how to best remedy these violations, if they find those violations. Now, this isn't the first time that the DOJ has stepped in to announce either an investigation or, quite frankly, a lawsuit. You have this happening in various other jurisdictions across the country where there are questions about whether local or state governments are infringing on Second Amendment rights. But Dillon, in her letter to the Philadelphia mayor, said, if an appropriate remedy cannot be achieved through an agreement, the Attorney General for the Department of Justice is authorized to bring litigation in the United States District Court. Now, again, this is targeting Philadelphia and Philadelphia police, the issue of permitting carry permits and being able to revoke those permits. The mayor's office didn't immediately respond to an email seeking comments from the Center Square, but the DOJ said in their announcements of the investigation that it is a violation of the Second Amendment for government officials to use vague personal discretion when determining whether to issue or revoke permits to carry firearms. They went on further to say in 2008, the U.S. Supreme Court, in its landmark decision, Columbia versus Heller in the District of Columbia, that decision held that the Second Amendment protects the right of law-abiding citizens to possess weapons that are in common use for lawful purposes. Now, in 2022, the Supreme Court held in another case that permitting officials may not base licensing decisions merely on their personal discretion. The DOJ said in their announcements here, it is alleged Philadelphia police use just such discretionary standards to improperly limit Second Amendment rights. Now, to give a sense of where some in Pennsylvania stand on the issue of Second Amendment rights and the court's interpretation of that right to keep and bear arms, Pennsylvania State Senator Maria Collette, earlier this month on the Senate floor in Pennsylvania, gave a list of grievances about the current U.S. Supreme Court. And she criticized rulings on election law, presidential immunity, and more, but she also took a moment to take aim at the landmark decision New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruen from 4 years ago that set a new standard for how courts are to determine whether or not state and local governments can infringe upon Second Amendment rights of the people.
That same year, the question in Bruen was whether states could meaningfully regulate firearms in public spaces. To answer that question, the court relied on an interpretation of the Second Amendment that, until very recently, was rejected across the political spectrum. Chief Justice Warren Burger, a President Nixon appointee, a conservative, and the man who led the Supreme Court for 17 years, said publicly in 1991 that the rewriting of the Second Amendment as an unlimited individual right was, quote, one of the greatest pieces of fraud, I repeat the word fraud, on the American public by special interest groups that I have seen in my lifetime, end quote. That was a Republican Chief Justice calling the entire jurisprudential project a fraud. And in Bruen, that fraud became the law of the land. The court invented a new historical test that has thrown gun safety laws across the country into chaos and tied the hands of legislatures trying to respond to mass shootings.
Now, this particular issue, far from resolved, even after the Bruen decision from 2022, which essentially said that governments have to show an analogy of their current law reflecting something from the nation's founding 250 years ago when the Second Amendment was included in the Bill of Rights. What does the Second Amendment say? A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, whether or not this particular investigation into Philadelphia's police department's issuing of carry permits and being able to revoke those brings any fruit, we shall see. And the team from the Center Square will be continuing to track that story and the latest developments on these and other issues impacting your Second Amendment rights.